She looked at me across the dimly lit room, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm sorry." And I couldn't stop the smirk from curling on my lips, because deep down, I knew the truth, she was sorry, because she had been caught. The air between us was electric, charged with something neither of us wanted to name. Every subtle shift, every brush of her sleeve against mine felt like a dare, a question we were both too stubborn to answer aloud. The evening hung heavy around us, soft golden light spilling from a single lamp, casting shadows that seemed to move with the rhythm of our tension. I could see her hesitation, that fragile line between defiance and longing. My pulse thumped a little faster when her gaze lingered, when her hand brushed against mine as if by accident but with deliberate intent. The room felt smaller, the world narrowing down to the space between us, and I realized this wasn't just about apologies, it was about what we couldn't admit. We had history, and history had claws. Unspoken words hung in the silence, teasing us with what could have been, what might still be. The flicker of a smile, the almost imperceptible tilt of her head, each gesture seemed to betray the carefully constructed masks we wore for everyone else. I wanted to push her away, but a part of me wanted to step closer, to close the distance that had been stretching between us for months. Forbidden attraction isn't always loud, sometimes, it's the quiet moments, the shared glances, the way someone's presence alone makes your chest ache. And then, just as the tension threatened to break, she stepped back slightly, a fleeting mix of vulnerability and defiance crossing her features. My mind raced with the possibilities of what could follow, but I didn't move. We were suspended in that fragile space, teetering on the edge of confession, desire, and reckoning. The moment stretched longer than it should have, leaving the night pregnant with questions neither of us were ready to answer. It ended there, a heartbeat, a glance, a charged pause, leaving everything unsaid, everything unresolved. And in that suspended silence, I knew that whatever came next would change us forever. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. She moved closer, just enough that I could catch the scent of her perfume, subtle, lingering, impossibly familiar. My chest tightened with a mix of anticipation and frustration. She spoke, but her words were barely audible, swallowed by the quiet hum of the city outside the window. "I didn't mean." "I didn't," she faltered, trailing off, and I realized it wasn't just her words that were hesitant. It was the history, the weight of everything unspoken between us. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let my gaze trace the line of her jaw, the curve of her shoulder. There was a soft, almost imperceptible shiver when my eyes met hers, and I wanted to reach out, but something held me back, the memory of the past, the careful walls we had built around our hearts. She laughed softly, a sound that felt dangerously intimate, as if it were meant only for me. Her hand brushed against mine as she adjusted the sleeve of her shirt. I caught the movement, lingering just a moment longer than necessary, and felt a jolt of awareness, a reminder of how fragile restraint could be. The room seemed to pulse around us, the air thick with what we weren't saying. "I hate that you get under my skin," she admitted, her voice trembling between anger and desire. I smiled, knowing she could see the same truth reflected in my eyes. Every glance, every subtle shift of posture, was a confession we couldn't speak aloud. My fingers itched to close the distance, to bridge the gap that stretched between longing and fear. Yet we stayed suspended, caught in a delicate dance of proximity and restraint. Her presence was magnetic, pulling at something inside me I hadn't dared to touch for months. And still, a silent question lingered, would giving in mean unraveling everything we'd carefully constructed, or would it be the first step towards something neither of us could resist? I watched her, and she watched me, and the world outside that little room seemed to vanish. The tension was unbearable, delicious, undeniable. Every heartbeat, every fleeting brush of skin, was a spark in a room already full of fire. And just like that, we teetered on the edge, suspended between desire and hesitation, the night holding its breath with us. The air felt thicker now, like every unspoken word had gathered weight and settled around us. I could sense her hesitation, a delicate barrier she hadn't fully dismantled, though every glance betrayed her longing. I wanted to cross the room in a heartbeat, to close the small distance that had somehow become insurmountable, but something tethered me, past hurts, secrets neither of us dared voice, and the careful armor we'd built around ourselves. Her fingers brushed against mine again, just a fleeting contact, but it carried the gravity of months of restrained yearning. I felt a surge of heat and the sudden sharp pang of restraint. I wanted to reach for her, but I pulled back slightly instead, as if that tiny motion alone could protect us both from the consequences of desire. "You always do this," she murmured, her voice almost a whisper, charged with frustration and something more dangerous, vulnerability. I shook my head, unable to deny the truth in her words. We circled each other, a dance of intention and hesitation, each step forward matched by a step back. The room seemed to shrink with every heartbeat. Shadows flickered across her face, highlighting the tension etched in her jaw, the slight quiver of her lips. I wanted to read her mind, to know why she was holding back, and yet feared the answer might make the invisible walls between us collapse entirely. Her gaze flickered downward for a brief second, then returned to me, steady, daring, as if challenging me to break the unspoken rules we'd written in silence. A laugh, soft and almost bitter, slipped from her lips, a reminder of the secrets we carried, of the moments we had stolen but never named, the things we couldn't undo. I felt a pull, magnetic and impossible to resist. I leaned just a fraction closer, close enough that our breaths mingled, our shadows touching. She shifted, meeting me halfway for a heartbeat, then gently stepped back, leaving the tension taut as a wire. Neither of us spoke. There was no need. The room was alive with everything we were too careful to admit, heavy with longing and the fear of surrendering to it. Desire hung like an unspoken promise, shimmering in the quiet. And in that silence, I understood, it wasn't just want, it was fear, it was history, it was the storm of everything we had tried to ignore. We were both on the edge, teetering dangerously close to losing ourselves to each other, yet unable to fall. And somehow, that made the air between us burn even brighter. The room seemed to shrink until it held only the two of us, the city lights outside reduced to a faint glow against the windows. Every heartbeat echoed, every small movement magnified. She shifted slightly, and I felt it in my chest, a rush of awareness that neither of us could ignore. The space between us vibrated with the weight of everything unsaid, every lingering glance, every ghost of past moments that had led to this precarious edge. Her voice faltered, then steadied, fragile yet daring. My breath caught. I leaned forward, instinctively, as if gravity itself was pulling us together, and she didn't move away, she let the silence fill the gap, letting the tension speak for us. Our eyes locked, unblinking, and in that instant, it felt like the world had paused, holding its breath alongside us. My fingers twitched, close enough that if I reached just an inch further, we would touch. I could see the faint rise of her pulse at her neck, the delicate quiver of her lips. She swallowed, a soft sound that reverberated in the room, and I knew she felt it too, the electric pull, the ache that was neither fear nor longing but something that contained both. "I don't know how much longer," she whispered, voice barely audible but heavy with meaning. I leaned closer still, drawn by something I had no right to name, and the air around us seemed to hum. The distance that had always been polite, careful, shattered into fragments that hung between our fingertips. For a heartbeat, the world felt like it had contracted into a single line of tension connecting us. Her hand brushed against mine, a fleeting contact, feather-light, yet it ignited something fierce and tender at the same time. We froze, aware of the spark, the electricity that leapt between us without a single word. A laugh, almost nervous, almost broken, escaped her throat, and I mirrored it, as if the sound itself could hold the tension at bay. We didn't speak, didn't move. But the moment was unmistakable, raw, unyielding, and full of unspoken confession. And in that charged silence, it felt as if we had finally touched, in every way that mattered, even if we hadn't. The room, the night, the very air around us trembled with what was coming, poised on the edge, just before everything erupted. The rain fell soft against the windowpane, a steady rhythm that matched the beat of our hearts. The apartment was dimly lit, shadows curling in corners as golden lamplight spilled across the room. Everything else faded, the city, the noise, the world outside, until it was just us, suspended in that delicate, electric bubble. Her hand found mine, not just touching but claiming, and for the first time, all the walls we'd built dissolved. Fingers intertwined, our grip light yet certain, conveying more than words ever could. Her breath mingled with mine, warm and shallow, trembling with the weight of every unspoken longing. I could feel her pulse against my chest, and it mirrored my own, a language we understood without a single syllable. "I've waited," she whispered, voice trembling like a confession caught between fear and desire. I didn't need her to finish, the words were already written in the brush of her fingertips along my arm, in the tilt of her head toward mine, in the way our gazes clung to each other like lifelines. The space between us disappeared, replaced by the quiet intensity of presence. Her forehead rested against mine, a gentle pressure that held worlds in its simplicity. Every inhale, every exhale, carried the memories of months, years, and everything in between. My hands found the small of her back, not as an act but as a question, and she answered with the subtle press of her body against mine. It wasn't about desire alone, it was about release, about acknowledgement, about finally letting the heart speak what the lips could not. Outside, the rain intensified, tapping a soft percussion against the glass. I could feel the electricity in the air, not from storm or lightning, but from the closeness, the warmth, the shared surrender. Her laughter, low and incredulous, brushed my cheek, followed by a quiet sigh. Their bodies spoke the words they couldn't say, the ones that had lingered like perfume in empty rooms, teasing and haunting. Time seemed to bend around us. Every heartbeat, every glance, every shared breath was magnified, tender and consuming at once. There was no rush, no urgency, just a slow, deliberate unraveling, a quiet letting go. Her hair brushed my face, her shoulder pressed into mine, and the world outside became irrelevant. This was the moment, raw, intimate, breathtaking in its simplicity. The storm outside echoed the storm inside, but we were safe, enveloped in each other, suspended between longing and fulfillment. And in that shared silence, in the subtle press of skin and the warmth of her presence, we had finally arrived. No words were needed. No action defined it. It was everything we had been holding back, finally allowed to exist, exquisite and untamed, a poetry written only in heartbeats and soft breaths. Morning seeped in quietly, soft and unrelenting, through the rain-streaked windows. The city outside was alive again, but inside, the room held a fragile hush, a silence that felt heavier than words. We sat a few feet apart, neither daring to speak, yet bound by the echo of what had passed between us the night before. Her gaze lingered on me, searching, as if trying to measure the permanence of what we had shared. I wanted to speak, to claim some clarity, but the weight of unspoken confessions pressed down on my chest. Every thought was tangled, longing, relief, guilt, hope, and I realized that the connection we had finally allowed ourselves to feel was not simple. It was messy, layered, and undeniably human. "I didn't expect," she began, voice trailing off, then settled into a sigh. She curled her knees to her chest, and I could see the faint tremor in her hands. I reached out instinctively, then pulled back, unsure if my presence would comfort or complicate. We had crossed a line, yes, but it wasn't the line that scared me, it was what came after. We didn't need to speak. The air carried everything, the brush of hair against shoulder, the warmth left in the spaces we had occupied, the quiet rhythm of two hearts still echoing the night's intensity. Somewhere between the relief of release and the fear of consequence, we began to understand each other more deeply, in ways we hadn't before. A knock at the door startled us, sudden and sharp, breaking the fragile cocoon. I froze. She did too. For a moment, the reality of the world outside returned, obligations, secrets, responsibilities. I moved toward the door, heart pounding, and opened it to reveal someone unexpected. The visitor's presence was a jolt, a reminder that life didn't pause for longing, that consequences often waited quietly just outside. She stepped closer, almost instinctively, and I felt the anchor of her presence. Whatever the interruption, whatever the truth we had yet to face, the night had changed something irrevocable between us. There was no rushing, no forcing, no pretending. Just the slow recognition that our hearts had touched a truth we couldn't ignore, messy and real and intoxicating all at once. The morning held us in suspended uncertainty, but the tension no longer felt threatening. It felt like possibility, a chance to navigate the storm together, for better or worse, with the quiet knowledge that some bonds, once formed, can't be undone. The rain had finally eased, leaving the city glistening and quiet. Inside, the apartment was warm, wrapped in the soft glow of morning light filtering through half-open blinds. We sat close, a small space between us, yet the weight of the night before had drawn us together in ways words could not capture. Her head rested lightly against my shoulder, and I felt the slow rise and fall of her chest, matching the rhythm of mine. There was no need for confessions now, our hearts had spoken in whispers, in touches, in the silence that had stretched into something sacred. I tilted my head, brushing a kiss to her forehead, and she sighed softly, a sound that carried relief, contentment, and the quiet thrill of having survived our own storm. Time seemed to settle around us, gentle and unhurried. Every glance we shared held understanding, a promise that the tension, the mistakes, the confessions, and the longing had led us here, to this fragile, luminous peace. The world outside hummed with normalcy, but inside, we existed in the quiet gravity of what we had chosen, each other, fully and without pretense. "I never thought," she murmured, and I pressed my lips to her temple, letting the warmth of my breath speak the words my mouth could not. It didn't matter if it was love or survival or desire fulfilled, all that mattered was this moment, this choice, this heartbeat. Eventually, we shifted, hands brushing, fingers lacing together, the smallest smiles shared in recognition that this connection was ours to navigate. The tension had softened, replaced by a quiet intimacy that promised patience, understanding, and perhaps, for the first time, trust. The storm of our hearts had not vanished, but it had been tempered by acceptance. And then, just as the sunlight caught the edge of her hair, she lifted her eyes to mine, and we simply existed together, in peace and in presence. Nothing needed to be said. The world was still complicated, messy, uncertain, but here, in this room, with foreheads touching and hearts quietly aligned, it was enough.